This is ShareInsights. The user interface for everything in ShareInsights is a browser. You have nothing to install on your desktop. In fact, ShareInsights itself does not need to be installed on the data lake grid. It runs on an edge node. So before we look at the dashboards that have been created in ShareInsights, let's take a look at ShareInsights Data Lake Explorer view. Now, regardless of how the data was brought into ShareInsights, it could have been in any of a number of formats, JSON, XML, it might have been semi-structured text, perhaps we have CSV files or exports from databases or feeds from other streams. It's represented to the user as if it were tabular data, a very familiar looking column-based view that's sortable and explorable. So now let's take a look at some Radia data, which we've brought into ShareInsights. This is data that came directly out of Radia, and we can search for the tables by name, and we'll see that we've got a number of the tables out of the Radia system: device configuration, location, BU status, and so on. What we're going to do is take a look at first of all, a simple dashboard that was built using this raw Radia data, show you how quickly that can be pulled together. And then we'll expand the use case a little bit and show you a bit more of a configuration management console using ShareInsights on Radia data. So looking at these data, let's take a look at our first dashboard. So it's a fairly straightforward thing to use. You've got a number of different widgets, total bulletins per rating with pop-ups, bulletin details, also still sortable, and a bit further down, device compliance by bulletin. So I can very easily look at what's the current state of a particular device relative to the bulletin from Microsoft, for example. So how do we build this? Well, this is where it gets really fun. The process of developing a dashboard at ShareInsights is by using what we call the flowline editor. It's all drag and drop, all graphical, no programming required. So in this case, or in any dashboard that we build, we can look at all of the available data sets. It might be the Radia data sets that we looked at earlier, which are currently being used just by us, or there may be published data sets. ShareInsights is very much oriented towards sharing and collaboration. So when we get to the point where we've created a data set or a dashboard which we want to share, it's as simple as publishing that item and it's now shareable by the rest of our group. So if we want to use data set, it's as simple as dragging and dropping it into a flow line. And then a data set, imagine that data is being fed into a task. In this case, the task is called add column. The tasks are also selectable from the menu to the right. So you'll notice we have some very Excel-like tasks like aggregate, filter by, add column. We've got joins and intersections and unions, which are much more SQL-like. And then further down, we've got some more machine language and advanced analytics types of operations like correlation, prediction, clustering, and so on. This library of tasks is constantly growing, and of course, ShareInsights allows you to bring in your own advanced analytics or machine learning code to customize your implementation. So if I want to take a data feed and feed it into a particular task, again, it's as simple as dragging it into the flow line, and then the output creates a new data set. So each time I click on one of these items, I can see over here on the right what its attributes are. So the Radio NVD bulletin, for example, that data set, which we brought in from Radia, has these attributes. Here's the BU status table, and so on. So what we're doing is each line here that we're creating by specifying data sets, tasks, and then feeding the output to widgets, such as we see down here. You'll notice the tabular device compliance view, the bulletin details view, and the total bulletins view. Those are selected from the widgets table. There's a wide variety of graphical representations. And once again, we simply drag them into a flow line, set them up as the output of a set of operations, and that's what gets you this dashboard. Very straightforward. So we're now looking at a graphical representation of several views of the Radia data, and we can see what kinds of things have been going on by bulletin per rating, by detail, and then by device compliance. So let's take this a step further then, and maybe enrich the Radia data with some additional data from the outside. So what we're going to look at here is we're calling it a patch deployment summary console. It's a bit of a command center for how Radia operates. And notice that we've got objects like drop-downs for the dates. These are all individual graphical widgets that were created by simply dragging them into the flow line. So what we're looking at right now is devices by state. devices targeted for scan by state, and what's the current state of the device patch status. So for example, in California, I've got 7 devices in green, which means successful, 4 devices in not scanned, not yet, and then 2 devices which have failed. So a couple of things here. We've quickly pulled together a graphical representation of the current state and grouped it in some interesting ways. What we've also done is we've enabled Radia history. So as you know, Radia does not maintain the history of its data. It's a transactional system. It does the updates of the configuration. It takes the patches, takes the bundles that we create, delivers the patches, and they're either successful or they're not. Now, by bringing that data into Radia, into ShareInsights, we're directly importing it from Radia. We are looking at point-in-time data, and that gives us the ability to also do interesting things like historical lookbacks, predictive look-forwards, analyses. So, for example, we might want to say, have the number of failures or the number of excessively long patches been increasing as a function of location or of time or perhaps of weather. So that's what we've built in this dashboard. And then taking a little further down, we've enriched the Radia data with some geographical data. Now, Radia also does not have geo data. It identifies its endpoint machines by machine ID and not by geospatial location. So what we've done is we've enriched that data, and we'll show you how with some additional geo-rich data. This might be coming from a service management system, a job scheduling system, perhaps some other asset inventory management system. We'll show you how you did it. But the widgets that are provided allow you, as you automatically drill in, to basically see what's going on in a particular area, what's the status of the devices. If I want to drill in a little bit further, I can see what's going on in a particular region and get diagram information showing me what's my current state of particular devices. So how did we build this this dashboard? Let's take a look. Once again, we take a look at the edit function, and it simply is a question of looking at the flow lines. We've got some of our devices, some of our device data, which is in the Radia tables, and we've also brought in an external data set, Radia device location. We simply joined by using the join widget, the join task, which we pulled out of this task box. We joined device location to device status and created a thing, created an output device which gives us the details, which we can then use to do the geo mapping. It's as simple as that. So we're dragging, we're dropping, we're using objects from the data set, task, or widget library, and it's automatically being created as a dashboard. So the final thing I'd like to leave you with is the concept of exposing data through automatically generated APIs. It's very important in a Data 3.0 environment to make data available not just to the human user and viewer of the console, but to external sources, other pieces of software, and so on. So what the approach that we took within ShareInsights is that everything that you see is exposable as an API, even these charts and the graphics that I'm using today. So for example, if I wanted to take a look and see what data sets make up this dashboard, I simply type DS at the end of the URL for that console, for that dashboard we're just looking at, and what is returned to me via the API is the list of data sets. So let's say, for example, I'm interested in this one. Now, I might be a programmer who's looking at this data, or perhaps I'm a service who's calling the provided API so that I can take a look at what's going on. Simply by extending the path name of the URL, that causes ShareInsights to automatically invoke the API that we created. So in this case, I can see the data that's in the flow add columns data set. And if I wanted to do an operation such as filter by, for example, let's say I'm just interested in the data that are in the states. And in this particular case, I just want to look at California. If I don't know what the data sets are, I can see the data sample right in front of me. So this, again, is all exposed via an API, is accessible to any piece of software who wants to use the APIs. So in this case, I'm looking at an automatically generated API that first told me what tables were available and then enabled me to essentially do a query of only the California-based data sets. That is a quick tour through ShareInsights for Radia.